You are listening to the Gritty Podcast, where we talk about all things gritty. All right, folks, welcome to the Gritty Podcast. I am your host, Brian Call, and today I'm joined by Brad Hunt, and we are back into the book Crow Killer, the Saga of Liver-Eating Johnson. Last episode, we talked about his wife.
Yep.
She's a Flathead Indian. The Swan is what they called her. She got murdered by some Crow.
Yep.
And Crow Indians, and she and her unborn baby, Jeremiah Johnson or John Johnson or the Crow Killer or Liver-Eating Johnson, found her.
Yep.
And was well, we don't really know exactly, although he has sworn vengeance now upon the Crow Indians.
Yep.
And now there is a legendary feud that's about to ensue between him and the Crow. So that's where we left off. We're going to get into it today, and we're going to proceed with the story. Hope you're enjoying it. If you're listening to this podcast, then we are most likely out hunting.
Yep.
We are in the process of dropping episodes, book review type shows while we're off in the mountains. This is a series. If you're just coming onto this podcast for the first time, this episode, you can go back and check out in the list of podcasts in chronological order.
Yep.
The start of this book, and we're just making our way through it because it's a fascinating story and really, really interesting to go back in time like this, and to, as we're hunters too, just to hear how they survived, what they ate, how the mountain men operated. Jeremiah Johnson he's a legend of mountain men, and this is his story. So before we get into that, support us if you like what we do by subscribing to this channel, leaving comments on films we drop and videos, and shopping over at Peaks Equipment. If you shop over there, use the code GRITTY, get some trekking poles, get some
gaiters,
headlamp.
Yep.
I can't say enough about the products over there. They're excellent products. If you don't have them, consider getting some stuff over there if you need it, and use the code GRITTY. You'll save, and it helps us fund the show. So we get a little kickback every time you use the code GRITTY over there.
Yep.
Same thing with Mountain Ops. If you head over to Mountain Ops, use the code GRITTY over there. You get free shipping. Sometimes there's other discounts associated with that code.
Yep.
And I love my Mountain Ops Ignite. I love the Bugleberry. I like the Citrus Bliss. I like the Pink Lemonade.
I like their apparel and stuff, too.
I like their apparel, the gym shorts.
They came out with new socks.
The merino hoodies I've been wearing on hunts for years are the perfect weight.
Yep.
I love merino next to skin. So consider that. Check that out at Mountain Ops. And right now is your last chance to get in on a big giveaway that Stealthy Hunter has put on. Ryan and Hillary have a big giveaway. It includes a new PSE Evo XF bow, dozen arrows, Day 6 broadheads,
Stone Glacier pack,
crispy boots,
Western Hunting Summit Pass,
$300
to the Stealthy shop. There's a lot.
Big package. To be entered to win, you just got to go shop at Stealthy, and for I think every $25 you spend,
you get 10% site wide, and every dollar is an entry.
Okay, so. Thank you, Brad.
Yep.
So how can you go wrong? You get 10% off, and you get entered to win the prize. So hopefully you do like Stealthy and Hillary, and it helps them do what they do. So it's a win-win across the board for everybody. I highly recommend the CBD sleep gummies and the CBD gummies themselves. We have been using those for a long time, and especially Ryan, CBD gummies, CBD oil, has really helped with his joint health and his inflammation. Same with me. I'd say he's a better responder than I am.
Yeah.
Everybody's a little different, but just about everyone benefits
I would say
from
this.
CBD.
So my wife, she's been training pretty hard for her half marathon race and everything.
Yep.
And she started getting a couple little shin splints here and there. And she was icing and stretching. That probably has something to do with it as well.
Yep.
But she, for about a week and a half, 2 weeks, she's been using the roll-on CBD roll-on ointment. Yeah. And gone. Like, she hasn't had any issues. She's been
that CBD oil roll-on is great. It's like the old Ben Gay, but it's got so many grams of CBD. And for some reason, putting it on the muscle itself where it's hurt through the skin.
Yep.
It definitely
works wonders.
Pretty incredible stuff. So check that out. And then, of course, Stealthy Hunter rifle cover, Stealthy Hunter glassing pad. Like I said, right now it's 10% off on everything, and you're entered to win a big package, and it helps us do what we do. So check that out. Your last day to enter for the prize package and get the 10% off is
August 31st,
which is like tomorrow or the next day, depending on when this podcast airs.
Yep.
So get in on that. All right, Brad, let's get to the book. It says, starting out with chapter 6, it says, it was in 1848 that the first news of Johnson despoiling the Crows spread through the West. Over vast territory where white men's campfires were few, far from the Absaroka's own lands, which is Absaroka is the Indian name for the crow.
Mm-hmm.
So over the vast territory, far from the crow, where the crow hunted, crow warriors' bodies, and only crow warriors' bodies, were found mutilated in special fashion, not merely scalped, but cut beneath the ribs, and the livers removed. Delgue, Bearclaw Chris, and Bigfoot Davis answered the questions when they were put to them. Johnson, they said, was eating these livers.
No thanks.
What Johnson's motive was, they did not say. Few knew even that Johnson had taken the swan to wife. So short had been their time together. The general knowledge of Johnson's motives among the scattered inhabitants of the wilderness resulted only from an anonymous Indian's accidental spying out of a visit to his bones. So the legend for why he is killing Crow Indians and only Crow Indians and eating their livers is because the legend is that someone saw him, dealing with his wife's bones.
Yep.
Also, that his wife was just gone. He had a wife, and now she's gone. What's interesting is why the liver, and what about I couldn't find anything where that was considered like some sort of insult to Indians or some kind of. Did he do it? Was it a combination of vengeance and insult and craving? Like, did he just like the taste of liver? Did he feel like the liver was empowering? Like,
honestly, who likes the flavor of liver?
Dude, animals,
maybe,
dogs.
Maybe human liver is different.
Most carnivorous animals love liver. It's like one of their favorite tasting liver treats for dogs. No idea. Weird. Different. So, naturally, the vendetta could not remain hidden. Within half a year, Johnson became the crow killer, Dapiak Absaroka, or liver-eating Johnson. 49ers on their way to dig California gold heard the tales as they passed through mountain country and carried them to the coast. Mountain men made an epic of the story. Many of them had, when hard enough put, eaten human flesh. But limbs, of course, never inner organs. They have their standards, Brad.
Yeah, no thank you. Like, I'm sure, give me a piece of meat, but the liver.
I mean, we cringe, but dude, if you were a hungry man out in the wilderness and desperate enough, I mean, look, I hate to burst anybody's bubble as they listen to this, but myself, I do not have like the sentimental attachments to the aversion of eating human flesh.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm different, but I'm just like, dude, no, it's protein.
I think it's life or death situation. Like,
we eat just about everything. Like, what's the difference?
It's red meat.
It's red meat. So, or is it white or whatever?
I don't know.
I look at it and I'm like, in a desperate situation, I'm not surprised if there's meat available and you're hungry.
Yeah.
It's sort of like people who have sentimental feelings toward eating monkey or bear. They're like, it's just two people like. I didn't get that gene. I'm too practical. I'm like, it's meat. You got to eat to survive. You eat it and you move on.
I'm wondering when they're going to let us start hunting feral horses because there's a lot of meat on a horse.
And a horse is good. I hate it a lot in Japan. So it says, white mothers in far-flung outposts sent idling youngsters scurrying for cover with the admonition, "I'll get liver-eating Johnson after you with his knife." And when at long intervals the Crow killer came into such outlying posts as Fort Laramie, the womenfolk of soldiers and settlers closed their shutters and peered through the cracks at the dreaded solitaire, who strode by with scalps dangling from his belt. They shuddered at the sight of his great red beard, more crimson yet in their imaginations. They told one another that they had caught a glimpse of the cold gray gleam in his eyes, and that they had felt in his passing the chill of death. Proscribed, feared, and hated, yet respected by all, this was surely the loneliest figure this lonely West had ever known. When Johnson did come to the post to trade, he brought crow scalps and finery, and the furs he brought were of such quality that traders vied for their purchase. In return for these he received powder and ball aplenty, so little flour or meal as to draw comment, and salt and sugar and coffee. The salt was subject matter for an eerie joke. Do he salt them, Injun livers? But the joke was told at a safe distance. No one pretended in Johnson's presence to feel sore beneath the ribs, as was the common gesture at the mention of his name. All stood out of his path. Johnson came to Fort Laramie in 1851, the year incidentally in which Crow lands were bounded by federal treaty signed at the same fort. Boundaries meant nothing to him, of course, nor, for that matter, to the Absaroka. Bearclaw, Chris, and Delgue saw him there briefly, and Del reported his equipment. He still carried the Hawken he had bought from Robideau, a weapon indeed by which he swore. From his belt hung 14-inch bladed Bowie knife, which each with polished rosewood handle. Report had it that these had been made for the famous Irish huntsman Sir George Gore. His fringed buckskins, his moccasins, indeed all he wore was of Crow manufacture. All had been stripped from braves who had died by his rifle or his Bowie knife. As Del and Chris saw him, he was the embodiment of mountain man pride and wily ferocity, without the mountain man delight in comradeship and conversation. Bearclaw had not seen his friend Johnson for years. Now he sought him without a proposition for a trapping trip. He sought him out with a proposition to go trapping. Johnson said tersely that he had other business and strode away. Del pulled Chris back before he could follow and said, "Can't you tell? He's on a trail." The Crow killer strode to the feedlot where he had left his horse and where the owner had regaled the curious with the traditional tales of the Big Black's exploits. How he could walk guard while his master slept, how he hated Indians and could scent them from afar, how no man but his master could approach within kicking or biting distance of the Big Black. A crowd gathered to watch the powerful animal nuzzle the red-bearded giant, then stand docile as the liver-eater saddled him and tied on his purchases. Without a glance around, Johnson mounted, placed the Hawken across his saddle, and rode away. The Black's nose pointed toward the west. Wonder where he goes. Wherever he goes, you can bet there's crows, and he knows it. He's on a death trail. There were indeed crows where Johnson was heading, and he did know where they were, and he was on a death trail. Men had come to know that the liver-eater never rode without a purpose. So, so he's mad.
Man on a mission.
And
vengeance.
Obsessed with vengeance, and there's... you killed his wife and his unborn child and strode into his abode and dared attack him.
Yep.
One thing about him as a legend, unlike some other mountain men, was that he literally was a warrior in the sense of your traditional mythical hero of a warrior, someone who sought out battle and fight and one-on-one with the best of the best, a fighter. You know, someone who truly was wired to battle other humans or anything really that's in his path. Yep. And he never backs down. But he's also smart enough not to attack 20 Indians at the same time. Right. You know, he's
very methodical in his killings, I would say, you know.
But also risky, because every fight you get into, it only takes one mistake.
Right.
And somebody gets you.
Yep.
But there's got to be a part of him that doesn't care if he lives or dies.
Yeah.
That every day is ready for that moment.
Which I think can be very, very fearful of those that he's after because he's like, live or die. He really doesn't have the fear, doesn't care.
Those are always the most deadly people, the ones that are ready.
Yep.
But also people who are ready, like today could be my day, and they recognize it and know it. I think they feel more alive often, and they're more cognizant of what they're doing day to day with their life, realizing that it could be the end tomorrow.
Yep.
They live with more meaning and purpose and drive their motives. They're you know, I had a job for years, and I was doing accounting and finance and all that, and my wife got sick with cancer, and everything changed after that. All the money, the job, the career, the stuff that we had built didn't matter to me anymore. What mattered was other things. Just everything that mattered didn't seem to matter, and the things that didn't matter before seemed to matter most.
Right.
And the next thing you know, I'm quitting my job and doing things that I like to do, and be damned what the consequences are. I don't, you know, whether I make money or don't make money, I'm just going to do what I like and what I love, and if it turns out, great. But I, like Johnson, I'm like, if I fail or win, I don't care.
Right.
It makes you more dangerous, you
Absolutely.
know? It makes him dangerous being like, I could die today, and I don't care.
Yep.
Like, I'm ready. If I have to go meet my maker, I'm all good.
And that's probably his intention is like, I may die today, but somebody else is going down with me.
Well, and he has, I think, not much he wants to live for other than freedom and another fight.
Yeah.
At this point,
right.
You know, grief does crazy things to people, hardens them, makes them determined, dangerous.
Yep.
Now, going back to the book, chapter 7. Now, the lands of the Crows in mid-19th century were much as the fur trader LaRoque had reported them 50 years before. As described in the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1851, the boundaries ran thus. Commencing at the mouth of Powder River on the Yellowstone, thence up Powder River to its source, thence along the main ridge of the Black Hills and Wind River Mountains to the headwaters of the Yellowstone, thence down the Yellowstone to the mouth of 25-Yard Creek, thence to the headwaters of the Musselshell River, thence down the Musselshell to its mouth, thence to the headwaters of Big Dry Creek, and thence to its mouth. There's your boundaries.
Yep.
They kind of seem like they might meander a little bit. Hard to tell exactly. Yeah. That's a lot of mouths of a lot of rivers. But Crows had ridden far from tribal lands to seek out and kill the swan. His wife, the Crow killer, would pursue them, likewise, on their lands, or wherever they may ride. Far away to the west, even beyond Fort Benton and the headwaters of the Missouri, there lay a country wild and primeval in its great mountains, alive with game. The country of the Bitterroot Mountains. Here each spring came the Crows. This was Flathead country now. These fabled hunting grounds of many tribes, these green valleys and tortuous streams beneath looming peaks that had seen the wars of so many peoples, were not open to Crow hunters, except as they came for war or on specific business. The Crows possessed excellent qualities. They were proud, brave, and stalwart. They were not quarrelsome, like, for example, the Blackfeet, who were continually at war with this or that tribe. The Crow braves were good family men. Crow counselors listened to the wisdom their women might have, though other tribesmen mocked them for such weakness. The Crows were fine artisans and manufacturers, hence conventional traders rather than thieves and marauders. They were peaceful in that they did not seek wars, but when attacked, they usually routed their attackers, taking more scalps than they lost. The eastern third of their nation, to be sure, plains hunters who chased the buffalo, were subservient to a chief who lived more in company trading posts than among his people, and who was much given to drink and petty disorders. But the Crows west of the Divide, notably their famed leader Big Robert, forever exemplified the nobility, the dignity, the wise counsel, and fighting strength which had made their nation proud. It was the Western Crows with whom Johnson carried on his feud. Big Robert had sent 50 of his picked warriors to the Bitterroots to trade with the Flatheads for horses. Their bugling packs held buffalo, robes, necklaces of grizzly bear claws, finely beaded leatherwork, and eagle feathers. The Crows were the best tanners in the West. In exchange, they would seek out the finest horses bred in the mountains, grown sleek in the green valleys. They rode as a cavalcade, with scouts ahead and trailing behind. and vedettes spread out from the column. Behind them, riding his big black horse, sitting in a crow saddle, his eyes ever scanning the skyline and the rocks about him, came Liver-Eating Johnson. Somehow he had learned of their plans in advance. To trail such a column was mere child's play. There was, of course, no intention on his part of attacking 50 seasoned Crow warriors. Even he acknowledged that later, that to have engaged in such open battle would have been the foolishest thing he could ever done. Rather, he bided his time until he could overtake them strategically by night at the forks of the Beaverhead. Coming on the hot ashes of their campfire on the banks of that stream, the trapper dismounted, took 4 horsehide covers from his saddlebags, and drew them over the hooves of his mounts. Leaving the plain trail, he rode flanking it, slowly, carefully, silently, lest he alert a rearguard scout.
Pretty clever.
Did you know the mountain men did that?
Not necessarily, but I figure there's
4
ways.
horsehide covers from his saddlebags and drew them over the hooves of his mount. I bet the Indians were doing that all the time.
Right.
You know?
Probably.
Being quieter, sneaking someplace, not leaving tracks.
Yeah.
When night came on, Johnson saw a flicker of campfires ahead of him, reflected against a canyon wall, where a tributary flowed into the Beaverhead. Picketing his horse, he climbed to the rim rock overlooking the stream and watched while the Crows prepared their evening meal. There he studied their camp arrangements, and he made his plans. Slipping back to his horse, Johnson quickly unsaddled, placed the animal on a long tether, ate a portion of cold, jerked buffalo meat, and crawling into a thicket about 20 yards from his horse, went to sleep with the animal as sentry. 2 hours before daybreak, he was up and about. Having made sure of his horse, he went back to his former vantage point on the rim rock. Below him, he saw the sleeping camp. 2 Crow sentries were on guard. One was dreamily tending the fitful fires, while the other, in monotonous routine, paced back and forth between the camp and the picketed horses. Highly trained animals, these were loosely held. Some had already jerked their picket pins from the stony ground and had wandered a little apart. Near them, Johnson saw a stack of buffalo robes and other trade goods behind which he might hide in order to surprise the sentry. Slowly bringing into play all his skill and experience, Johnson worked his way toward the horses. Once he felt that he had frightened them, he stood silently for some minutes until he saw the culprit, an otter, slide into the water. Inching forward again, he finally reached the piled goods. From this base, he meant to kill the sentry, scatter the horses, and thus put the 100 warriors afoot. He considered. He dared not use his revolver, for he must pull the picket pins before awakening the camp. His bowie, of course, was quick and noiseless, but the sentry might cry out before he could strike deep. Reaching down, choosing from the stones that lay at his feet, he hefted one that was as large as a young pumpkin and awaited the brave's return. The warrior was larger than he had seemed from a distance. Indeed, he was huge and no doubt powerful. He came within a few feet of Johnson's hiding place, glanced at the horses, and turned again toward the camp. He was barely 4 steps away when the liver-eater hurled the stone. The missile was unromantic, but effective. Caught just beneath his head, the crow fell without a sound except the hiss of his escaping breath. The stone itself was noisier. Johnson quickly seized the senseless Indian, lifting and carrying him to the scrub timber at the edge of the ravine. A few seconds later, he was back in the midst of horses, grunting softly to reassure them as he pulled the picket pins. Having fed them all, he scattered pebbles wide among them, at the same time whooping loudly. As the dreaded yell of the mountain men rang out in the sheltered ravine, the camp of the Crows came instantly to life. Their own fierce yells and the shrilling neighing of the stampeding herd rebounded against the canyon walls in their chill pre-dawn, and then were drowned out by the thundering hooves of horses in a dead run to the northward. Quickly, the sub-chief shrilled his orders, and a dozen warriors set out after the maddened herd. Back in the scrub timber, the crow killer threw the body of the huge sentry over his shoulder and slipped through the trees. Don't fall into his hands. Like,
no.
Don't. It says, into the trees. What's going to happen? Some hours later, his horse saddled and ready for the trail, Johnson bent over the unconscious warrior. He seized the greased scalp lock, ran the point of his bowie around its base, placed his moccasined foot on the victim's head, and snapped off the scalp. Observing that a tremor ran through the brave's body, he swiftly swept his blade across his throat. As he pulled a bull hide belt from around the waist of the crow, Johnson saw that a long, dried scalp dangled from it. A scalp with a wealth of long black hair. He imagined for a moment the ambushing of an emigrant wagon trail, the crack of gunfire, the whoops of the crows as they closed in after their victory, and the screams of the women. Perhaps this warrior had produced both scalp and belt together. Surely his carrying of just the one memento, instead of hanging it in his teepee, marked its acquisition as notable. But a second glance told Johnson that the trophy had not been torn from the head of a white woman. He ran his fingers through the coarse black tresses. As he looked closer, something familiar caught his experienced eye, and in that instant, in the clear light of dawn, the liver-eater knew certainly that in this, the beginning of his greatest effort against his enemies, he had met and killed the murderer of his wife. Quickly, he braided the hair of the scalps together, the new with the old. Turning to his mount, he looped the top knots through the headstall of his bridle, and it was not until he had one foot in the stirrup that he remembered his identity and his oath. Drawing his bowie knife from his sheath, the liver-eater stooped quickly and made an incision beneath the slain foe's ribs. Inserting his hand, he felt for the liver, grasped it, and wrenched it free. Expertly, he ran his thumb and forefinger along the blade of his knife and replaced it in its sheath. Blood dripped from his beard as he rode away to the northwest, skirting the ravine. He had his vengeance. He had killed the swan's killer, but more than one crow had had a hand in her death. Now, by having set a half hundred crows afoot, he had gained enough time to alert the Flatheads for their coming. The Flatheads would agree that one scalp might be avenged by any number, and they would welcome a share in such vengeance. Yeah. So, of course, there's a lot of literary license being taken here. No one was there. No one witnessed it, right? These are tales told by other mountain men. And the theory behind this one is he told the Flathead Indians, and he told Delgue, and he told Bear Claw Chris that what had happened, that he thought he did this, he thought he did that. And so these are stories told by one mountain man to another. Lance Johnson could be full of crap, and it could not, but the Indians corroborate some of the events. Right. So the details of this are speculative, of course, as he tells this story. But the gist of the story still remains true. The next chapter, he's going to go to the Flathead Indians. Yeah. And he's going to be like, hey, the Crow are coming to trade for you, but like they killed your daughter, my wife. Yep. And insulted you and did all this stuff. And so we need to kill these Crow when they come to trade. And so you'll see how this starts to iron out. Okay. So Chapter 8, Crow against Flathead. Johnson knew he had no time to lose. The Crows would be more than a day or two in rounding up their horses, and he had delicate negotiations to complete with the Flatheads before their arrival. As was his custom on the trail, he slept little, traveling from long before sunup until long after sunset. He camped briefly, always on rising ground where he could see afar. He knew, as he later said, that the Crows were never any more than one day behind him. No doubt scouts had surveyed the neighborhood after his departure, discovered the mutilated sentry, and so learned the identity of the killer. Mm-hmm. After he had pushed his big black almost beyond endurance, he sighted the foothills of the Bitter Roots. The horse faltering within 5 miles of the Flathead encampment and soon stumbling to its knees, Johnson sprang clear, drew his Walker Colt, and shot the suffering animal. He carried in his saddle, bridle, and roll, with some small help, the last half mile from the Indian boys out lizard hunting. The Flathead camp lay secluded in a green valley large enough for the grazing of the 500 horses the Indians hoped to trade, but small and secure enough for a careful policing. Johnson walked through the only entrance, a narrow trail between two high and rocky knolls, after making himself known to the 2 sentries posted above him. Passing in, he strode on toward the lodges, laid out like a great arrow along toward the path of the entrance. In the great natural pasture, 50 mounted warriors were cutting out of a vast herd the 500 choice ponies, sorting them into bands of a dozen or less by color, fleetness, and training. Crows drove hard bargains in new horse flesh as well as the Flatheads. Johnson wasted no time but made his way to the great lodge set off by itself, the lodge of Bear's Head, who had been a sub-chief but now ruled over his tribe. After a few words, the sentry pulled aside the bearskin over the entrance, stepped inside, then in a moment came out and held back the flap. Johnson entered. So he goes inside this teepee, sits down with the Bear's Head chief. They shake hands. There's some trading going on as they greet each other, and it comes down to and this is his father-in-law. The chief claps his hands. They have tobacco. A woman brought them some, and they smoke together. Bear's Head filled the pipe, tamped the contents to his own satisfaction, and lighted it, and they passed it back and forth. Once they had smoked it all, now Johnson could broach his business. He spoke in the Flathead tongue. The old chief's eyes flickered, perhaps in surprise at the lingual accomplishment of his son-in-law. He took in his hands the trophies Johnson extended, but at once discarded the fresher of the 2. The other he cradled deftly, passing his fingers through the long black strands. The brittle skin crackled under his touch, the skin of the scalp. And a tremor ran through his wrinkled hands. Have you ever put your hands on a human scalp?
Nope.
It's funny how many of these things were just like kicking around back in these days. And, I mean, it's pretty morbid.
Yeah.
But at the same, it's just crazy, like how prominent scalps were.
Right.
As like a decoration, a trophy.
Like a trophy. I mean,
like
basically like
an item of value.
Right. A prized medallion or something.
Hey, that's a pretty scalp. Can I buy it from you? I'll give you a blah, blah, blah. It's like, that is someone's head. Anyway. So he says to the chief, look, it's the Swan. And he says, how many sons have passed? And Johnson picked up, sand from the floor and trickled through his hands and let it trickle. And said, a lot of time, many, many moons. And Bear's Head handed the scalp back to his son-in-law and picked up the other. He had missed nothing and noted that, he said they belong together. And Johnson said, yeah, I found this scalp on this warrior. And he said, then the chief says, well, where are the others who came to kill my daughter? Where are the crow's companions? And he said, well, there were 50 where this man came from, and 49 come to trade tomorrow because he killed one of them. So the old chief's voice came like the soughing of the wind in late autumn. My warriors will be ready. We will trade death. We will count coup on these crows. The 2 arose from the buffalo robe, and Dafike Absorica, liver eater, crow killer, they call you, my son. You have already avenged my daughter. My warriors will do so for me. He clasped his own 2 hands together in the gesture of parting. I don't think there was a lot of debate here. Like, if you were an Indian tribe and someone insulted your tribe or killed someone, you couldn't let it slide. Right. I don't think they lived in a time where you can let that stuff slide. You don't really have a choice. You have to retaliate, and with swift and brutal fashion. Yep. Because that's the only thing that keeps, a warrior from determining that maybe continuing this isn't a good idea.
Yeah. Yep.
It's just might is right here. And if a tribe can attack another tribe and there's no consequences to it, then what's to prevent them from doing it all the time?
Yeah, exactly.
But if a tribe attacks you and you come back and they kill one of yours and you kill 30 of theirs, the next time they go, we need to be careful who we're killing.
Yep.
And I think that's just whether they wanted to trade. They have 500 horses there. Mm-hmm. The Crow are coming with some awesome stuff. And how do you build wealth? It's commerce and trade, and you get more power.
When you're one of the best tannery tribes in the West or whatever. I mean,
being the Crow, valuable. You trade with the Flatheads who have a lot of horses in the valleys, and you end up with these, a synergistic relationship. And you're not going to murder these people because you want their stuff and they want your stuff, and the cost of the fight to take it is more costly than actually just trading for it.
Right.
And so therefore trade is as old as time, as long as time immemorial that human beings have traded.
Yep.
And it's based on trust. That's it. Based on trust. Trade, I heard years ago, when eBay first came online, and I know a lot of you people who grew up with the internet, this might sound weird to you, but for us who didn't, people started selling stuff on eBay. Yeah. Just random people.
Right.
And it was like, I'm not going to pay some dude I've never met, like that lives in Minnesota, $400 for this thing. How do I know he's even going to ship? I pay him, and then I just trust him to ship it.
Exactly.
The whole thing seemed ludicrous at the time. And heaven knows people can sell a fraudulent item, and people get screwed all the time. Yep. In fact, if you're watching our videos and you get some notification saying text to this number, blah, blah, blah.
We will never do that.
You are being scammed. And some of y'all have been scammed because you wrote us and we found out that the scam works like this. They leave their little info and say, you just won something. Contact
a new bow or whatever.
Then you contact them and they say, you won a Hoyt bow, which is like $2,000 or $1,800. And they say, all you got to do is send us $100 for shipping.
Pay for shipping.
Just send us $100 for shipping, and then we'll send your prize out to you. And they spoof their account so it looks like our account. Yep. They steal our images and they upload the graphics and all of that. If you go to their page, you'll find that it's just a fake page, but people don't. They just see the logo, and then they go, oh, must be Brian. Not being like you get tricked. So that's what's out there, so beware. If we don't say your name at the end of a video, then it didn't happen. Anything in text, that's not how we're going to tell anyone. No. Anyone in the comment section that you won, we'll do it in the video live.
Unless I have your email, we are not going to reach out to you. You got to reach out to us.
You got to send us your contact info, and then we'll get back to you. So economy, trading, it's built on trust, and so now they're stuck. The tribe is stuck between the idea of trust and having a relationship and trading goods and retaliation for killing one of their own, like paybacks. And so they are going to destroy the trust that the Crows have right now in trading. They're going to destroy all future trading for at least some period of time until peace can be made. Because here these warriors are coming in to do some trades with the Flatheads in good faith, and the Flatheads are now preparing to murder as many as they can. So this is a definite sort of betrayal in a sense.
Just got put on their list.
Yeah, and vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. So here we go. Back to the book. He says, We're gonna be ready because we will trade death. And so 2 hours after he had held counsel with the chief, Johnson rode out of the valley astride a long-limbed black 3-year-old he himself had chosen from the picked herd because he had shot his big black, a sturdy, powerful brute, well able to carry his great weight. Already, Flathead scouts were out on the trail to report on the Crows' advance. At the narrow entry to the valley, 200 seasoned warriors were making plans and preparations for ambush. With so many attending to this affair, though Johnson knew that 200 Flatheads were no more than an even match against 50 Crows, he turned his horse's head southward toward the Snake River Plains. He was going to visit his friend Wani, the fox, chief of the northern Shoshone. Now the northern or Wyoming Shoshone were not mocked as diggers like their lowly relatives, the Fort Hall Shoshone, or the Lemhi, or the Bannocks, or some divisions of the Nez Perce, who subsisted on such little food, grasshoppers, even herbs, perhaps an occasional rabbit, as was to be had in the deserts and badlands and gorges south of the Bitterroot Mountains. But at this time these northern Shoshone were camped on Lost River gathering tobacco. The country through which Johnson rode was out of a nightmare. Its streamways were dry washes, except when cloudbursts came, or will-o'-the-wisp creeks rolling along for a time on the surface of the rocky terrain, then disappearing to run underground. The Crow Killer was in no hurry, and when camped on Red Rock Creek, he was overtaken by 2 Shoshone braves on sweating horses. Learning that Johnson was headed for their own encampment, they decided to ride with him. They had recognized him at once, and he noted that each carried a flathead scalp, recently taken. In daytime he contrived that they ride ahead of him, and at night he slept, as always, a little apart, and with one eye open for trouble. Thus they arrived at the encampment on Lost River. The dogs and children greeted the famed killer with much bedlam. Older men, including the fox, greeted him as a friend out of the past. Young warriors insisted they had at once known the great white brave who kills the crows and eats their livers, but all were puzzled to see their tribesmen along with him, alive yet carrying with them the scalps of his kinsmen. Escorted to the lodge of the fox by a warrior sporting 4 eagle feathers, for the 4 enemy scalps hanging in his teepee, Johnson entered. First ceremonials concluded, he went straight to the point. He spoke of the braves who had accompanied him from Red Rock Creek. Each had a flathead scalp. They fit along with the crows, your enemies the same as mine. Wani picked up a gourd rattle. The flatheads were indeed his people's allies, and the crow killer was his particular friend, to whom largesse was due. At the first sound of the rattle, the tent flap was cast aside, and a young man, a brave in his early 20s, stood before Johnson. Johnson observed with special interest the long, livid scar that covered his left cheek from the ear to the point beneath his chin. Your son? He asked, half affirmative, and the chief nodded. He gave the boy a guttural order, and he departed noiselessly. Many moons passed, said the fox. My son went beyond the Camas prairie with a hunting party. He was but a child chasing a rabbit. He became lost. A big cat sprang upon him from the rocks as he struggled hopelessly. A rifle ball entered the heart of the beast. The shot was fired by Hatcher. I heard the story from Hatcher, said the Crow Killer. The fox, as you know, is only a sub-chief, and Wani. Washakie has always determined penalties, but tomorrow when you go, you will carry the scalps of the 2 warriors who fought beside the crows. I am sorry for their families. It's a harsh living back then.
No
so
kidding.
The 2 dudes that had met with him and rode with him were carrying flathead scalps.
Yep.
So they obviously had fought against flatheads. And the flatheads are allies of the Shoshone, so they're like, why are they partying and hanging out with the crows?
Yeah.
And because they fell in with the wrong crew and murdered flatheads or killed flatheads in battle, the chief is like, all right, yeah, off with their heads. When next he sat in Bear's Head Lodge, Johnson laid out before his kinsmen 2 flathead and 2 more recent Shoshone scalps. The story was there to be read. 2 victims and 2 atonements, 4 gifts for a father-in-law, an opportunity again for the chief to show his people how their losses were avenged. So again, you know, he kills the Shoshone, these were Shoshone Indians, and all of this was because the Shoshone. Part of it is because the Shoshone are also a kinsman to the Flathead, and so. You know, they joined up with the enemy. Hanging in the lodge, Johnson saw 36 crow scalps. Only 13 had escaped the trap at the narrow pass. So those 200 warriors killed all but 13 of the 49 crow who came to do the trading. Bales of crow finery, too, were stored in a curtained-off space in the chief's lodge. All these scalps were Johnson's for the taking, as much of the goods as he could transport on 2 powerful pack horses. 200 Flathead warriors escorted Johnson with his cavalcade out of the valley. His black stallion was caparisoned with a rare white buffalo robe as a saddle blanket, upon which sat a richly beaded and intricately worked crow saddle. The bridle, too, was beaded and spangled with silver ornaments. Johnson himself was dressed in white doe's skin, beautifully fringed and beaded and quilled, with handsome cap of beaver and new buckskin moccasins and leggings, and from his wide belt of buffalo calf skin hung in bright scabbards the rosewood-handled Colt Walker and Bowie knife.
I wonder if those 36 men that died, if he ate their livers.
He wasn't there. Riding along, let's see here. The warriors, too, were dressed in recently gained spoils. They had feasted the crow killer, had loaded his packs for him, but despite such festivities, there had been mourning in the camp. Ambushed and outnumbered 4-1, the Crows had upheld their storied fame as fighters. 60 Flatheads Indians had fallen. So, more Flatheads died than
the Crow, yeah.
Riding along the Little Snake toward his cabin, liver-eating Johnson may well have reminisced. Here was the bend in the trail where the Swan had last seen him. There was the glen where he had taught her the use of the Tennessee rifle. Above towered Battle Mountain, where he had sworn his oath of vengeance, and now indeed fulfilled. Yonder was his own dooryard where he had discovered her scattered bones. That dooryard, that cabin, now had his full attention. He noted the smoke coming from the chimney, bringing his hawken to bear full upon the doorway, the hammer full locked. The crow killer charged forward, dropping the halters of his pack horses. Almost too late, he saw a familiar jug-headed horse in his little corral. A voice called, "Hold up there, partner, before you gets drilled." And then Delgue stepped out of the cabin, his palm held outward in a gesture of peace. Sheepishly, Johnson let the hammer down of his hawken and dismounted. "Thought at first you were a crow chief," said Dell, "with all them trappings." And there you have it. The saga continues. So, what do you think so far?
Pretty interesting. Did you know that liver-eating Johnson, they say in his time of his killings and stuff, was 300 livers that he ate or more?
Yeah, I think the book tallies something over. Well, they know he had like 200 scalps in a certain time. I was going over the math in his lifespan. It was like for a while there, he was averaging one kill a month.
Right.
Like 12 a year. That's a lot of men to kill on the regular. Every month you run in, you end up murdering somebody.
Hard dude. Like, I don't know.
Well, the question is, they say he never killed a white guy, not even a Frenchman.
Right.
You got to wonder, like, how
many did he actually beat the hell out of, though? I don't know if there's many, but
I'm always able to take this story with a grain of salt as well. Yeah. But still, there's elements of truth to it, even if it's grown overly large or bigger, But the question remains. I mean, the man was there, he existed, and the legend is told. So, and it wasn't told necessarily by, like, Daniel Boone, for example, and a few others. They had actual writers come out and fictionally make these stories up, even though the truth was amazing, and a lot of it is documented in recorded history.
Yep.
But with Jeremiah Johnson, there actually isn't much at all in the way
and it's a friend of a friend of a friend who was
were
told this, and
who were quite old, 80s when they were telling these stories. Yeah. And the person, and Johnson was, and it's crazy because Johnson dies in a veterans hospital in the East Coast, and is buried in a veterans, because he served in the Civil War. The dude was there, and he lived a long time, and he had a legend, and so there's no question he killed a lot of crow. It seems pretty much fact. It's no question that he ate their livers. That's pretty much fact.
Hell of a trapper.
Yeah, and he survived. beyond, like when mountain men's average lifespan was like
40 years old, maybe
35. He managed to live to a ripe old age, despite all the fights too.
Right.
Like there's no question. He's also a big man. I don't think that was made up either. Like
no,
he just, so many people talk about him, write about him in different books and letters, and he's just a huge dude.
Yeah.
But his constitution is just amazing. Like his ability to withstand cold, to smell, to like his immune system. He just is a human specimen.
Oh, you're eating raw liver. I mean, that's the dang trash can of the body.
Doesn't it make you wonder, like, what am I missing by not eating more liver?
Oh,
The man's a
Ryan
beast.
Hiller, you need to make more pills.
Yeah, liver pills.
That's all I'm doing. I'm not dipping it in milk and soaking it. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, the next episode is going to be pretty good. Tune in for that one. We appreciate you guys listening to this show. Yep. Do us a favor, like and subscribe to the channel. Follow us on iTunes or Spotify for the audio version of this podcast. And go shop. Now's your last chance. This is your last opportunity to save 10% at the Stealthy store, Stealthy Hunter, and get yourself some CBD oil, get yourself a rifle cover glassing pad, whatever, and be entered to win a massive prize package, which I think Ryan's going to pick that winner shortly after.
Yeah.
We'll see who that winner is. But, yeah, to be entered to win on that, you got today and tomorrow, basically. So get in on that. Thanks for tuning in, and stay gritty.